Welcome back to the Sherry Sylvester Show. The 2026 World Cup featured 104 matches in 16 host cities, most in America, including Dallas and Houston in Texas. 7 million people attended the games, but for many Americans, attending a game wasn't really the point. Somehow, we have been called on to host an international tailgate party that went on for weeks, and our job was to make sure that everybody had a bang-up time. In the end, it may have changed the way the world sees America and the way America sees itself.
Welcome to the land where the whole world comes to play. Flags from every nation waving proud and on display. From Boston to LA, from Dallas to the sea. 80,000 voices, this is what it means to be free. Hey! Welcome to the land, yeah, we're rolling out the door. Every street a stage, every stranger wanting more. The ball is in the air, and the whole wide world can see. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the land of the free. The Scots marched into Boston with their bagpipes ringing clear. Kilts and tartan everywhere, the whole city stopped to hear. They sang Flower of Scotland at the Red Sox Fenway Park. Lit the whole of New England up and glowing in the dark.
I invited my colleague Josh Treviño to join me on the show today to discuss the impact of the World Cup on America's image in the world, on our own thinking about how we see ourselves, and whether or not soccer will change our politics or even our sports. Josh is the Chief Transformation Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation in Austin and is the Senior Director for the Western Hemisphere Initiative, the Senior Fellow for Europe, and the Senior Advisor to the President at the American First Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So, Chief Senior Fellow for Europe, the global media going into the World Cup.
Yeah.
It was particularly hateful. They were saying, we can't come here, we're going to be arrested by ICE, there's no mass transportation.
That's right.
And then we're seeing what we saw.
That's right.
So did it change anything?
Well, it certainly changed the perceptions of a lot of people who came to the United States to enjoy the World Cup. I think you're absolutely right. There was a lot of trepidation on the part of media, domestic and global, before the World Cup began. There was a lot of commentary, to your point, that ICE, deportations, what I had one Spanish senior official tell me was a war on Latinos that was underway in the United States, in which we include the Spanish, apparently, by the way, which is a contestable point. But all of this with and also with the unpopularity of President Trump in Europe in particular, and also in other parts of the world, that it was going to combine to make this a negative experience. And it is absolutely fair to say that now that we are on the other side of the World Cup, which was an extraordinary run, by the way, we can talk about that, that America did it right. You know, there are 3 nations hosting: Canada, the United States, and Mexico. But the almost universal consensus is that it's the Americans in particular who did a great job hosting. And I think there's empirically a lot of individuals from a lot of parts of the world who got to see something different and better than what they expected.
It's interesting because we've always known, I mean, America's been importing its culture since we had culture. So it's not that Europeans or people in the rest of the world are unfamiliar with us. They see our movies, they know our music, all of that.
Yeah.
But I have heard it suggested that what they saw during the World Cup and what then got projected on social media, it's just kind of how we live every day.
I think a lot of it definitely was. And, you know, you saw a lot of these social media accounts. Now, I don't know how many of them are actually real and AstroTurfs, but, you know, Freddie from Germany, Nobunaga from Japan, and so on, these individuals who came and, you know, sort of like Khrushchev at the supermarket with Nixon. It's you know, they're just amazed at going to H-E-B, and they're amazed at going to Buc-ee's, and they're amazed at going to Waffle House, all of which is great. And they genuinely enjoyed the type of sporting experience that they were shown as well. It's interesting to think about how different going to a major game is in the United States and in Europe. I have a lot of experience with American sports, attending American sporting events. There's nothing better than your average SEC game on a Saturday in the fall. But I've also been to and attended in person one of the biggest annual matches in European football, which is Madrid versus Barcelona. I had the privilege of going in 2024. An absolutely incredible experience. Now that's an apotheosis of European soccer. For us, that would be Tennessee versus Arkansas, which may happen more than once in a season.
Well, one of the things you wrote you wrote an article encouraging American fans after the USA tragically but predictably lost to Belgium, that we should root for England. And one of the things that you speculated early on in that column in your piece was that soccer is still like a second-tier sport.
Absolutely.
In the U.S., but does it matter? We have so much more to offer. I mean, nothing's going to beat SEC football. Nothing's going to beat college game day.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
in my view, the professional sports, they're having their own identity crises, and some fall. Wembanyama is certainly a phenom.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
well, I don't think there's any question but that real football, and baseball are going to remain atop the American sports pyramid pretty much forever. And I've been very glad actually in the past 2 to 3 seasons to see Major League Baseball really come back in popularity and engagement. And much to my surprise, I have to credit the pitch clock for a lot of that. But setting that aside, there is this second tier of sports, NHL, NBA. Being, I guess, at the top of the second, but then you have these other sports, and this is not a disparagement of them at all. But one of them is Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer in the U.S. and soccer in the U.S. in general is interesting because of how it's being driven. I think one of the bad things that happened to soccer early on, when there was the initial attempts to introduce it in the United States in the 1970s, was that it was sort of presented as like the global sport, and so you saw it kind of culturally wrapped up with efforts to promote the metric system in the U.S. It's literally true, actually. So you should like soccer and you should like the metric system. Why? Because they like it in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is an argument that makes no sense whatsoever. And interestingly enough, when you go overseas or even go to Mexico and you see what soccer is there, like soccer is a working class game of the people, actually has a ton to offer. It's extremely interesting. Anybody who says soccer's boring but then likes baseball, it doesn't.
No,
right, exactly. No, it's a terrifically exciting game. Right, precisely. And I love baseball. So it was sold in America essentially as an elite import, which is fundamentally what it is not. And I think it's been recovering from that to a great extent. And the two drivers of soccer in modern America, and I'm overgeneralizing a little bit, are MLS, which has actually managed to put out a pretty quality product, particularly in the past decade. I have to give them credit for that. Although they did enter into this deal with Apple TV, which I think has strangled their growth. So I'm hoping that will change in the fullness of time. And also the fact that there are tons of Liga MX fans in the United States. In fact, I believe, some viewer will double check me on this, but I think there's more revenue generated from the U.S. for some of these teams in the Mexican League than there is in Mexico itself. And so you get the combination of those two. I think the leagues will eventually merge. I think there's going to be a combined U.S.-Mexican League. And now I'm talking like in 20 years, by the way. I don't mean in the next few seasons. But it's here to stay. Fundamentally, it will always be second tier. It's just the nature of the ranking of how the American system works. But it's here to stay. We're going to continue to develop an indigenous base. I too was disappointed in how U.S. soccer did this time, and losing 4-1 to the Belgians is, I think the last country to lose to the Belgians that badly was probably the Spanish in the 16th century. And so this is not ideal. But we're not really a soccer power. We got to round of 16. Maybe we get to 8 in 4 years. Maybe we get to the semis. Who knows? But the sky's the limit for us. And I guess the last thing I'll say on the share is that we are certainly doing better than other mega countries. Where's China? Where's Russia? They're AWOL in soccer. We only have an upward trajectory for us.
Well, did this enter in? Talk a little bit about the soft power.
Yeah.
And the polling that I've seen shows not much of a change globally in attitudes. The many in the world still not happy with Trump.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about Trump's participation in the World Cup.
Yeah.
But I think I'm hoping, you tell me, is this how soft power works? Do people begin to question if they're handed down a lot of anti-American propaganda? Is this the kind of thing that make them kind of sit back and maybe question?
Yeah, well, I mean, a positive experience in that vein does contribute to whatever it is we're calling soft power. It doesn't mean there's going to be policy agreement,
Right, yeah.
By the way. But when you look at since you're asking about public opinion overseas, and there's different sections of that. When you look at European public opinion in particular, there's almost an inverse relationship between whether a Republican's in charge and European approval, and that's simply because there's several different reasons for it. Some of it's aesthetic. A lot of it is simply because the U.S. kind of Overton window of civics has been well to the right of the European one for the past 70 years ish, and so that's something that we need to be aware of. And then with Trump, there's particular issues too, given the stance of his administration toward Europe and kind of how Europeans react to his brand of populism and so on. So all that's bound up. I don't think a successful World Cup necessarily changes that. And so if we're looking at data saying, like, do you like America, to the extent that that's a stand-in for do you like the American government, that's just going to stay negative, and nothing's going to change it. Now, I don't, and that obviously that's not a metric that we ought to govern to or form policy to anyway. But underlying that, there is a sense of what's your sentiment toward the country, toward Americans, and I think I know that does matter in the long run as a font of policymaking, and I think we palpably improve things with this World Cup.
It's kind of how we often work in Texas in conversations with blue states and blue cities. I mean, when I heard on one of these TikToks the guy from Norway being amazed about the size of our houses, so the 1,100 square feet average house there.
Yeah.
So. And in the same way that we say to New York and Illinois and California, pass all those policies. Look what we're doing in Texas.
That's right.
Look how people are living in Texas. Look how people are moving out of here. So there's that kind of message.
Absolutely.
That is, look at the Waffle House. Look at Buc-ee's.
100%. And again, to your point, look at how the average American lives.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of Americans who may not fully appreciate. There's certainly Europeans who don't fully appreciate just how much standards have diverged in the past 20 years, really since the financial crisis of 2008. I mean, Europe was always somewhat poorer than the United States for a variety of different reasons, although the quality of life in Europe can be quite good. But on just GDP per capita, the two continents, basically, the United States on the one hand and then Europe in aggregate on the other, have diverged significantly. And I can tell you, firsthand, talking with friends and colleagues in the United Kingdom, for example, just two brief anecdotes. I had one individual tell me that she was going to she couldn't take a call immediately because she had to move to the one room of her home that was being actively heated. It was in winter, and they couldn't afford to heat the entire place. And this is a middle class household. And then there was another one who asked me only to call on voice over IP, so Signal, WhatsApp, so on, things like that. Because if I called on the phone, which is what I was originally doing, they would be charged an arm and a leg simply for taking the call. And it's things like that eat into the dignity of individual lives. And certainly when you think about the greatness of Great Britain or France or any of these countries, which do are intrinsic to the Western tradition and kind of part of us in terms of our inheritance and ought to properly enjoy in the flourishing and prosperity of the West, that individuals there have to live like that is an indictment of the choices, exactly to your point, that they have made and that their governments have made. And I hope that the World Cup experience maybe has recalled some of them to what their own inheritance ought to be.
Right. It seemed like it was just a stroke of luck that we were doing it during the 250. I was in Boston, and when Ghana held England to a tie.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it when the commenter said, England does not do well in Massachusetts.
Right. It's such a comedy softball. You can't help it.
It's great. But talk about your suggesting that we Americans should root for the English, despite the fact that we were celebrating the 250 over Argentina. What was your thinking on that?
Yeah. So I had a column in the Spectator World. So the Spectator is a London-based publication. I believe it's the oldest magazine in existence at this point. So it's like 200. It itself is like 250 years old. But I had a column stating prior to the England-Argentina match that Americans ought to root for England. And so there were two arguments that I gave. I won't recapitulate the whole column. One is that the English beat the Mexicans. Now the Mexican national team,
which we need to talk about too.
We should talk about that. Do you want me to save that for later?
Well, no. Why don't you talk about that now? Because
okay. All right.
we were definitely TPPF was definitely rooting for the English.
Of course, yes, absolutely. The Mexican national team is extremely good. Mexican soccer development and the excellence of Mexican soccer is really, really good. And for those who have the ability to do so, I mean, watch a Pumas game, watch a Club America, watch Rayados. I'm a casual fan of Los Tigres de Nuevo León. So all excellent
I don't
teams,
know what that is,
really good.
Well,
these are all Mexican league teams. So
okay.
like our two Mexican viewers will know. But but I say that as predicate. They're extremely good. They're extremely credible, and especially when they play in their home stadium, which is the venerable Azteca in Mexico City. They're almost invincible. And I will tell you up front, I have nothing but respect for the Mexican team, for the Mexican national team. I have a great deal of issue with a lot of the Mexican national team's fan base, which has a terrible reputation on a lot of different fronts. And just two incidents that I think will be illustrative of the whole. In 2004, for the Olympic qualifiers, the Mexican national team defeated the United States. I'm not upset about that because we deserved to lose that game. That was in Estadio Jalisco back then. But as just to kind of give you an illustration of the Mexican national team's fan base as being sort of the equivalent of, I guess, the Philadelphia Eagles fan base in the United States, like the worst people alive. Actually, that's not fair to the Eagles. The worst fans alive are the Redskins fans. But I digress. As the U.S. team left the stadium, they set up a chant, Osama, 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 which is low. And then, fast forward 22 years, the night before the England-Mexico game, they actually found the hotel which the English team was trying to keep a secret. They found the hotel where the English team was staying, and they shot off fireworks and clanged drums the entire night to keep the team up. Which is just, and think by the way that Mexico is supposed to be a host of this World Cup. Imagine if any American fans had done that. By the way, we'd never hear the end of it.
Although the Knicks did it to the Spurs.
So be it.
In New York.
Yes, exactly. Well, Mom Donnie's in New York. Is that? I'll probably get in trouble. Is that really America? So. But anyway, it is not good sportsmanship. It is not good behavior. It is a fan base that I wanted to see. And again, I have to just be really clear. I'm bifurcating. Nothing against the team. I wanted to see the fan base suffer a loss in the Azteca for those reasons, and they did. And I'm grateful to England for it. And on top of that, even if you don't have that baggage, what the English team did in that game, this has been obscured by their collapse versus Argentina, which I think was largely their fault, actually. But what the English pulled off in Azteca against the Mexicans was one of the greatest sporting stands of all time, in my view. When we look back on this entire World Cup, I think that is the one game that is going to stand out as the most white-knuckle, nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat game you could possibly watch, even more so than the championship itself, which I'm sure we will talk about. But if you weren't in it for the English beforehand, that won my admiration. I think Americans, we value fair play, sportsmanship. As Texans, we love last stands. Sometimes you win them, sometimes you lose them. But that was a great last stand. And so my argument was that you should support the English based on that. And further, that our ties to England, and this is relevant to the America 250 part, are actually should be remembered and celebrated. One of the things that you see, you and I are Texans. In the Texas Declaration of Independence, there's actually a line about the Anglo-Americans, and there's reference to the fact that there is this dual heritage, one of which flows from the other. And I think it's important, especially in the America 250 year, to understand very clearly that the American Revolution it's not the French Revolution, it's not the Russian Revolution. We're not think about all the other countries that have won independence from Britain, not from England, but from Britain over the years, the Indians, the Zimbabweans, and so on. We're not them because we didn't rebel to reject our Englishness. We actually rebelled and made revolution to claim a specifically English strand of liberty and inheritance that then flourished in the New World with an independent America. And without that English inheritance, the poet Alice Duer Miller in 1940 in The White Cliffs, she writes that our forefathers were never more English than when they rebelled against her. And I think that's completely true. And so part of America 250, yes, we won independence from Britain. Yes, we fought the King's armies. Yes, we defied Parliament. All that's true. But we did it because of a tradition of English liberty. And without that, I would submit that American republicanism, small r republicanism, is incomprehensible. And so this is an opportunity to honor that as well on the sporting field.
Well, let me ask you a question about that game, and then I think I can circle it back to what I wanted to ask you about Trump. I mean, many of us were watching that were rooting for England in that game, and when 11 minutes were added, I mean, the joking around the table was that the cartel had phoned into FIFA and said, 11 minutes or until Mexico scores. And the general feeling always that FIFA is corrupt.
Which is true.
And which is true.
Yes.
And then the differing interpretations of Trump calling FIFA and as was perfectly proper and asking them to investigate the red card.
Oh,
I'm taking Trump's side.
Against Balogun, yeah.
So what? There's two ways that's been interpreted. It's like, one, why can't the president stay out of it? That Trump has to be in the middle of everything.
Sure.
The other was, it's FIFA. We already know that it's corrupt. These are the people that Trump is the best at dealing with.
Yeah.
So what was your thought on? And then the outcome, it didn't matter.
I mean, just again to be really transparent, I didn't care one way or the other, and probably, I didn't think it was necessary for the American president to call Infantino and ask for the guy. But that being said, in terms of every national leader intervention in FIFA across the many years, what President Trump did was the only one that didn't involve corrupt exchanges of cash, and it was done completely in the open, completely transparent, and honestly, it was probably the most up and up interaction that FIFA's had with a world leader in generations. And so I was amused to say the least at the Belgian outrage, and look, so much of Belgian civics and place in the world is predicated upon these grand international organizations like FIFA, like the European Union, and so to suddenly develop a case of compunction over the mechanisms by which they work strikes me as opportunistic in the extreme.
Well, you talked about England's defeat of Mexico as what you thought was the best match in the tournament.
Absolutely.
What were some of the other best moments for you? Because I've got a couple I want to share from Boston.
Well, I don't mean to be predictable, but Ferran Torres's goal is the single goal in the championship. Was it was such a. I think the Spanish came out with 20 shots at the end, 20 shots on goal, and the Argentinians had 2, I think.
Yeah, finally had 2 in the last 80 minutes.
Something like that. Yeah. It was, but it was that lopsided. Seeing that goal and realizing that was probably the one was terrifically exciting. I can't make a case that the game itself was good, but in terms of atmosphere, and by the way, this is one reason sports is great, right? Because sports is so contextually dependent. An unremarkable minor league baseball game can be the most important game of a child's life if it's with his dad. And so for me, just in the World Cup, I actually had the opportunity. I was in Madrid. I had to give a speech to a conference in Spain. So don't weep for me. It was nice. But
I wasn't.
I had time to kill on the evening of the Spain-Austria game, and so I ended up getting to watch that in a sports bar in Madrid. And the game itself, not particularly remarkable. The Austrians folded pretty easily. It was obvious who was going to win. Not far into the first half, but the atmosphere and the people who came to see it and watching them watch the game, to me, will forever be memorable. And I'll never forget. Just to provide the scene, it was packed, and there was a mom and dad, and they must have been in their early 20s, very young, and they brought their baby with them. And this was not a newborn, by the way, so it's probably like a 1-year-old kid. But end of first half, mom picks up the baby, puts the baby on the bar, changes the kiddo into jammies, and that's where the kid falls asleep. And I thought to myself, I said, of course, in the United States, first of all, you'd never see this, or if you did, it would be alarming to see. But in Spain during the World Cup, it's simply what one must do in order to be a patriot and participate. And it's interesting.
Yeah, and always remembering, I posted it like everywhere. Spain was the last flag standing of the Six Flags Over Texas, so of course we should be rooting for them. As I've mentioned maybe 12 times on this pod so far, but I was in Boston, and so on the 4th of July, there is quite a sizable community of people from Capo Verde in Boston.
I had no idea.
I had no idea, 40,000 in this community.
Interesting.
So they were wearing the Capo Verde jerseys, and the rest of us were down on the wharf from Boston, all of that holy ground, and the fireworks are going off, and you had all of those feelings being on the places where Sam Adams had walked and Paul Revere had walked, and then people from Capo Verde would come through, and people would go, "Yay, yay, we're for you, we're for you." Wow. It was like that same embracing, because and there's been some criticism about, of course, those people, they couldn't afford to go. They were playing in Atlanta, I think. They couldn't afford to go to the game.
Right.
And there has been criticism about that, but I don't think that the ticket prices were incredible.
The ticket prices were incredible, which played heavily into my family's decision to not even try.
Right. Yeah.
Which a few years ago we talked about. They're going to be in Dallas and Houston, and we're going to see, and we just ended up not doing any of that. But look, I mean, the same is true of the NFL playoffs or the Super Bowl or something like that. Like you watch them or the Olympics in a lot of cases. So you watch them on TV and. But you still celebrate. Yeah.
Here was where I was going to go with this point. We have spent, some of us in this building and many of our supporters, we've spent over a year now looking at ways to save college sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And our primary argument, or at least the primary argument I'm in for, there's a lot of reasons to be in for it academically, is that college sports are so much the glue of America, that if we don't have it, we don't have Lubbock, Texas, we don't have Eugene, Oregon, we don't have Oxford, Mississippi. That's a way that we unite that kind of transcends our politics.
Yeah.
Is there any of that? I mean, that's what I hoped I was seeing in the World Cup, that this is kind of creating a community that, as you say, there's no change in politics. There's no change in worldview, really.
I think sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm done.
No. I think what you're putting your finger on, though, is something very, very real, and I completely agree with the characterization of the role of college sports in the United States. I think that is a role, because collegiate sports doesn't exist in the same way in Europe, in particular. Nor there's some parallels in Latin America, but it's not exact. But these are the roles, kind of the poles of the community, the focus of community pride, the expression of community identity, the bearers of community history in a lot of ways. These are absolutely roles that are played by soccer teams across Europe. Whether they're relegated, up high or down low. So that bearer of identity that in the United States might be expressed by Ole Miss, to pick an example, or UF or something like that, or A&M, since we're here at TPPF. I have to mention Texas A&M. Like all of that is a civic space that gets filled by Chelsea or Arsenal or Wrexham or any of these other, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, all these other teams that carry their community with them in countries around the world. And I think the World Cup was kind of the pinnacle of expression of a lot of that, uniting the nation.
And people really wanting a different view of the world. Another thing that I saw in Boston, thinking of the irony of having been to Scotland. Scotland's a poor, very badly ruled country, and seeing those Scots, and I'm thinking maybe they'll be reminded that they're really the birthplace of Enlightenment.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
we're the people that took that philosophy and it's in action here.
Well, I've yet to meet a Scots who isn't proud to discuss all the ways in which the Scots have dictated the course of world history, and especially American. So hopefully that inspiration will land where it needs to.
Well, what's your final thought on the World Cup? Now, we've got the Copa, right, coming up. Isn't that coming up? Didn't we just did
yes,
that?
Yes, correct, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've heard proposals that we do it every other year because it was so good. That maybe we change the cadence to every other year instead of every four. But
for the World Cup or for the
for the World Cup.
Oh, sure.
But those proposals may just be in my family.
They're well, not just yours. I think I'll have to confess to the viewers here that I don't know strictly how FIFA allocates all of this, but I saw a write-up, and I'll have to ask apologies for the writer and the publication because I've forgotten both. But I saw a write-up that basically looked at where the cup would go next. So actually in 2030, it's going to go to Spain, Morocco, Portugal. They're going to do this kind of Straits of Gibraltar thing. Where it goes after that, I don't know if they've chosen a 2034, but I think the upshot is that there's not really, especially if they expand the format, which Infantino was talking about, going to what it started at 64 teams this time. I don't recall actually,
I don't remember.
Something like that. So
That
they're either
sounds
expanding to 64, or they're going to go to 128. But in either case, if he's going to expand it and make an even longer tournament with more teams, which actually does make sense, it makes a lot of sense for the league. You're talking multi-nation, high security, high stadium capacity, competence and infrastructure. There's all these things that have to be met, and the U.S./North America is one of the few places that can do it. So my guess is that it's going to come back a lot sooner than we think.
Right.
Yeah.
It was. I heard it observed that it was a lot like March Madness in the length of it, and the Cinderella teams, and people would get behind them, and then they wouldn't make it through. So it'll be interesting to see what comes next. I want to thank you for being on the pod, the Sherry Sylvester Show, but I understand you've got a new pod coming up, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug it.
Thank you very well. First of all, thank you for having me. It's really an honor. Long time viewer, first time guest. So it's a pleasure. Yes, I have done a show called The Hard Country with Ariana Guajardo here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation for several years, and we talk about Mexico on that show, Mexican policy. So you can find that at texaspolicy.com. And to your point, I have a new podcast that actually we're going to record the first episode today as we're recording, so viewers will see it soon. It's going to cover history, culture, policy, and a lot of other topics. It's going to be very eclectic, and I hope informed and intelligent, but we'll let the viewer decide on that. But excited to do it, and thanks for letting me plug it.
Well, great. We will watch it. So it's just you?
Just me.
Oh, wow.
And the occasional guest.
I will really watch that because I'm always looking for ways where I can just talk.
Thank you.
Thanks again for coming down. And thank you all for tuning in to the Sherry Sylvester Show. You can find this podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to receive my weekly newsletter, Winners and Losers, you can sign up at texaspolicy.com. Follow me on Twitter, on X. I'm also on Substack. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.